good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Sarah Hagee. I'm the Executive Director here at the Electrical Association of Philadelphia. And joining me today is my colleague, Matt Divert, as well as our presenter, Mark Phillips with Illuminations. I'd like to thank Billows Electric Supply for their generous sponsorship of our virtual trade talk. Many of our virtual trade talks, including today, and bringing Illuminations on board. We're really excited for this presentation today. And before we do jump into it, you may have noticed we cannot see you, we cannot hear you. That is done by design because, of course, we are recording the session so that people can watch it later. That doesn't mean, however, we don't want your questions. So we've been doing this for a long time, but everyone check out where that chat button is. That's what we're going to ask you to use to submit questions. My colleague, Matt Divert, he's going to be facilitating the Q&A, both during the presentation, certainly for more technical questions, and of course, towards the end. So don't hold back, put those questions in the chat. And it is now my pleasure to formally welcome Mark Phillips. He's the Director of Integrated Solutions at Illuminations. Take it away, Mark.
Thanks so much. I appreciate the opportunity from the EAP, as well as Billows. Large enough to serve and small enough to care is their motto, and I think this is a great way that they demonstrate that, and I'm happy to be a participant, and I really do appreciate everyone taking some time out of your day to hear about the latest and greatest from the nLight lighting control system. So today we're going to cover a handful of things as some of the introduction info talked about. Talk about wired controls. We're going to talk about wireless, which is the nLight platform. We're going to talk about the future and what's to come, and also a technology called ABT that's really changing the way we do wireless controls. But I did just want to start off with a quick little question here. Feel free to answer. I'll give you a few seconds. Just to know if you're familiar with nLight or if this is your first time hearing about it. All right. So our agenda. Let's dig in. Great. We got quite a few people who are familiar. Excellent. And some that aren't. So that's also excellent. Appreciate the interest in the solution here. So I'm going to talk about the platform components. This presentation, we'll send it out. I have some live links in here that will allow you to go in, dig in deeper to the technology, dig in deeper to some tools that I have embedded in the presentation that you can use for reference on future projects or current projects. And you'll see those here. I have two live links right at the top. But what we're talking about today is a solution called nLight, and nLight comes from Acuity Brands. Acuity Brands is the largest manufacturer of lighting equipment in North America. So you know that this solution is truly tried and true. It is being controlled, or it has control over 2 billion square feet of technology, or of space rather. So whether it's driven by energy code, driven by preference, driven by application, we are in 2 billion square feet of commercial space throughout the entirety of North America. We can do interior, exterior, standalone, networked, wired, and wireless technology. So the solution itself, and we're going to dig into the various parts and pieces, but as a broad stroke, nLight can serve any purpose or any lighting scenario application that you can throw at it. Again, whether it's interior, exterior, wired, wireless, new construction, renovation, retrofit, we have a solution for you. And I think this slide does a good job of showing out a lot of the parts and pieces, primarily the fixtures that can come from Acuity Brands or others. Acuity will sell nLight air technology to other manufacturers to embed into their fixtures as well. And we're also showing it connecting into the sister company. So Acuity Brands owns another company called Distech. Over the last decade, Acuity has bought various different companies. They started with Sensor Switch, where nLight grew from. They bought a company called XPoint Wireless. They bought a company called EldoLED, driver technology. They bought a company called Distech that focuses primarily on smart building, building management, building automation. So Acuity really owns the components to really deliver on the promise of what a smart building can be, right? Without integrating components and technology, the idea behind a smart building is pointless, because you're going to be going through interfaces and communicating many different languages. That's not the intent with nLight. It's one protocol, one language to communicate across all lighting devices, and we can connect in natively to the Distech controls, or Siemens, Honeywell, Johnson, whatever you have as mechanical controls, we can do that as well. Example of what often drives our decisions for lighting, right? Obviously, lighting control. Obviously, there's a certain aesthetic that we want to achieve. There's a certain relationship or level of control that we want to drive, but oftentimes what drives a decision for lighting controls is energy code. And there's various different energy codes for Philadelphia, for the rest of Pennsylvania, for New Jersey, for Delaware. And Acuity provides a great tool or great tools to help you identify what is the right control to apply so that you can meet energy code. I have a live link here, and this is a snapshot of one of the documents the link will take you to. It's an application guide that speaks to office versus warehouse versus corridors versus private offices in the various different regions, right, that correspond to different energy codes. And then it gives you a nice little table that shows that cross-section of space type versus control methodology. So if you're in a classroom, you need to have occupancy sensors, or you can use a time clock in open office, or have occupancy sensors every 600 square feet, right? This is a quick glance to give you an idea of what types of controls you're going to require to meet energy code on your project. And then the rest of the document goes into those application examples that speaks to what are some appropriate controls, or what are some of the products that you can actually use to help meet that code. And that's really where we're going to go next. We're going to start to talk about those parts and pieces within Acuity. But really, before we talk about the parts and pieces, I think it's really important to talk about security. Security is of utmost importance as we think about connected building systems or platforms. Right? If I look at what happened 6 or 7 years ago with Target and their customers' financial information, right? That financial information was stolen, right? Credit card numbers were stolen, and how? They were actually stolen by a hacker who was able to get into financial information through building automation. So when we think about these building systems, they're not necessarily, they don't need to be have the strictest requirements. Well, they absolutely do. I think all of us on this call could probably say some commercial company or operation who has had or seen a ransomware attack, right? I think we've all felt it in some form or function, and I think it's only going to happen more. So Acuity has parts and pieces in place. They actually have a team, this PSERP team, that will stand behind us, stand behind you, stand behind your client, that should a ransomware attack occur through the lighting system, that Acuity is going to be there to support you, to help understand what happened, how it happened, get the system back up and running. And that's not a fee or service or a line item. It is just part of the process, part of the care and concern that we have and that they have for their clients, right? There's some other compliance and certifications, third-party certifications like SOC 2 compliance, where we actually get certified by a third party, where they try and poke holes into the security of the system. Of course, anybody with enough time and enough knowledge can get into systems, but in terms of what's commercially available, Acuity meets the most stringent standards for security. So the system itself, as I mentioned, this really is a platform. And what do I mean by platform? Well, there are different mediums through which we can communicate information. And one of those mediums is a Cat5 cable. And that's how nLight wired communicates. And here's a good example of what nLight wired might look like, where you have a system that's made up of Cat5 connected sensors, power packs, wall switches. We can have 16 zones, 16 scenes. We could run Cat5 1,500 feet. And then we could add other parts and pieces, like a bridge that I'll talk about, that you could add another 1,500 feet, and another bridge to go another 1,500 feet. So we can really create a system that control many, many thousands of devices, whether it's on one site, multiple sites, or multiple campuses around the entire globe. nLight Air, as you can imagine, is a wireless solution. The protocol or the means through which we communicate wirelessly is first devices are connected to one another via Bluetooth pairing. So there's a mobile app called Clarity, and that app will actually allow you to connect integrated fixtures or power packs or sensors wirelessly to one another. And then once that happens, we initiate another technology. We initiate a 900 megahertz signal. So if you're familiar with wireless, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, that's all 2.4 gigahertz. That's a higher frequency. We've selected a 900 megahertz signal, which is a much quieter band. And if I could use the example of, we've all heard a car driving down the street, and it could be pretty far away, and we hear the bass, right? We hear the bass pounding, right? Maybe in our house, maybe in our office. Why do we hear the bass and not the words or the higher sounds? Well, because those higher frequencies, those higher sounds actually get sucked up by the windows or the doors or our windows or trees in the way. The 900 megahertz signal, because it's lower frequency, because you hear the bass travel really far. Same thing happens with our 900 megahertz signal. We get some crazy range out of nLight Air, really industry-leading technology that goes 1,000 feet line of sight, and then we could actually repeat that signal. We could do 4,000 feet line of sight, or we can actually do 900 feet through typical commercial obstructions, and that's really unheard of in our industry. And I have highlighted here ABT. I'm going to spend a few minutes later in the presentation about ABT, or autonomous bridging, that makes this type of solution possible, because it really is unique to us and quite a capable solution to deliver on a low-cost install or a renovation retrofit where wireless is going to save quite a bit of time and make the job a lot simpler. So the interfaces. How do you interface with nLight? How does the client interface with nLight? Well, we've got these great looking new switches you see up in the corner. A bunch of different colors. There's a bunch of different styles. It's a flat, clean look, very nice aesthetic, and it's got a screwless faceplate. The nice thing about it is we provide a screwless faceplate with all of our switches. So it'll save you a couple bucks, save you some time. And a very easy way to install or remove, we actually have this very unique clip that actually just slides on over the switch. You clip it in place, and it provides you a nice, clean looking switch without much effort to install. On the Cat 5 or the nLight wired, we actually have 2 ports. So every single device is going to get daisy chains. So I have a Cat 5 in, Cat 5 out. With nLight Air, I'm going to give you a battery-powered solution, or we actually have a line voltage-powered switch. So if your client doesn't want batteries, they never want to have to deal with replacing them, we could provide you a line voltage-powered switch that's going to communicate out wireless signals. So great solutions. We also have, with COVID obviously being a concern, or other viruses or germs collecting, we can provide this IP54 rated cover that you could snap in, that actually gives you some classification, IP54 classification, that you can wipe it down, put harsh chemicals on it, so that you never have to worry about the button actually getting corroded or getting moisture inside the buttons that could cause an issue down the line. So some great switches available from either nLight Air, nLight Wired. A nice offering here in, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner, this is our Unitouch. This is great for when you've got multiple scenes, multiple zones. Anytime that you've got more than 3 wall switches on a wall, like every conference room, you've got 4 switches on the wall that are all going to control different fixtures or different zones. Your cost on this is going to be lower than 4 switches. And this is going to control 16 zones, 16 scenes. It's a great capacitive touch interface. This was launched maybe a year and a half ago. So no longer the resistive touch element, it's all capacitive. As I mentioned, 16 zones, 16 scenes. We can also control color temperature. We can control shades, and we can also give you a free app called My Personify. And what My Personify offers is an app from smartphone, Android, or Apple that is free, and you could connect via Bluetooth. So if you're within Bluetooth range of that switch, you can actually interface to it. So if you wanted remote control from a podium or from a desktop or area where you wanted that remote connection, you don't need any sophisticated Extron system or interface to make the system work. It's just all available via a free app called My Personify. The other device, a 3-gang device in the lower left-hand corner called Fresco. Fresco can do just about any load type you can throw at it, whether it's DMX, 0 to 10, dolly, MLV, ELV, phase dimming, you name it, Fresco can control it. The nice thing about Fresco is it gives confidence, or it allows any end user, whether it's a janitor or a teacher or a principal in a school, to go up and be able to change the lighting levels. Maybe it's in a lobby, maybe it's in a restaurant. It's going to give anybody the confidence to know, hey, if I press this button, this is what's going to happen. It's not press and guess and trying to figure out, okay, well, what happens when I press this button? I'm afraid to press that button. I don't know what's going to happen. Fresco walks the end user, the owner of the space, to know when they press this button, these lights are going to turn red, those lights are going to turn blue, and I could reprogram them to be green or yellow, or it's going to change a scene. And we can do up to 72 zones, 72 scenes. There's time clock functionality all built within it. So it's a very capable solution that wraps in just about any load type that you can throw at it all in one single control. And again, great for lobbies, great for houses of worship, great for ballrooms, great for the ever-present calf in the gymatorium in a school, where you're going to use a space in multiple different ways, and you're going to have multiple different users all wanting to control the lights a little bit differently. So it makes it very clean and very easy. I'm going to go on to the next slide here. So the sensors, we've got some unique capabilities within our sensors. Whether wired or wireless, we have many different form factors. So whether it's a ceiling mount or a wall mount or a corner mount, high bay, low bay, we can do detection of up to 45 feet in the air. So if you're working on a warehouse or maybe there's some site lighting, we have sensors available for just about every application. And that, again, is something that came out of Acuity's acquisition of Sensor Switch over 10 years ago, that they were able to piece together all of these technologies to make it work and make it work well. And now we're embedding the nLight and nLight AirNet. What's unique about our wireless sensors, the nLight Air sensors, they can be powered via low voltage. So again, similar to the wall switch, where you're going to have constant power, no batteries, we can give you a wireless communicating sensor that is powered via battery that's going to communicate out wireless to power packs or enabled fixtures. Or we can give you a battery-powered version of it. What's also unique about that is we can provide you a battery-powered dual-tech sensor. We're the only manufacturer on the market that can provide a battery-powered dual-tech sensor. Why? Because we use passive infrared and passive microphonics. We're not sending any signals out. We're just relying on responsive signals to transmit and receive those occupancy responses. So our batteries are going to last because they're passively listening. So what does that mean for you? That means fewer devices in the ceiling. Typically, with a battery-powered infrared-only sensor, you're going to have one of those maybe every 500 feet. But now that we can provide you a dual-tech passive infrared microphonic sensor, you can have those every 1,500 feet. So you're going to reduce your components, and you're going to get better coverage because of the dual technology. This device here that you see below this wall mount switch, I also show next to it a VLP. So VLP is called visible light programming. So it's a way, this is more on the contractor side, where if you've got 10 private offices, all one next to another, and you want to program it, oftentimes you got to press and hold a button, stand on one leg, and wait for the green light to flash, and then you hit it again. And then you just hope it works, right? You hope you counted the right amount of time. With VLP, it uses visible light programming. So it actually uses the forward face or the camera of your smartphone. There's an app. I set my timeout, I set my sensitivity, and I use the camera to flash a certain code through the detector to program the sensor for its timeout. So it's very user-friendly in terms of programming and changing settings.
Hey, Mark, we have a couple of quick questions in the chat in regards to the previous slide. Does the nPod Touch have time clock control?
So getting a little ahead of me, the nPod Touch itself does not have time clock control. However, I will skip ahead to this slide that we have a device that is in the same form factor as the nPod Touch that adds basic time clock control. So you can get up to 32 schedules with that one device.
And Mark, if this is not getting too far ahead, do you have a low bay sensor, IP66, low temperature, -4 Fahrenheit?
We have an IP65 rated sensor that is low temp as well as high temp. This comes in a bunch of different styles. And I think we also have an embedded version of that, but again, it's IP65 rated. Perhaps that may be enough for the application, but IP66 I don't think we have at this point.
Do you know the name of that sensor, Mark? The person in the chat was...
Sure. This sensor here is the RSBOR. And the integrated version would be the RMSOD. Part of, in one of the earlier slides, I had two links available. One of those links is actually a nice digital trifold sheet that lists every single product that we have and a little bit of information. So it's a quick glance of all the different styles, all the different flavors of the components that once you have your hands on that, you'll be able to see all the nomenclature that is associated to it. This smaller sensor over here, that can be embedded right inside a fixture. So rather than have sensors on your ceiling, if you're doing a renovation retrofit, you can just have a sensor in every single fixture and not have to worry about anything other than installing a wall switch and putting a fixture with an embedded sensor in it. We can provide that embedded sensor as either wired Cat5 connected or via the nLight Air.
A quick follow-up, Mark,
Sure.
in regards to the Fresco controller. How user-friendly is it? Is there a serious learning curve to program it?
No, so programming, we have tools online, videos online about programming, but typically Illuminations will come out, do programming, do training. We've got 18 people on our controls team that go out into the field, 6 of who have vans that go out, do field service, startup, troubleshooting. You've got guys doing design. So programming is one thing. Operation of by the end user, I don't think there's anything simpler on the market in terms of an advanced lighting control interface. There's also a free service available from Acuity Brands. There's a link that you could go on, click the link, and then you could say at Tuesday at 10 o'clock, I want Acuity Brands to call me because I'm going to be in front of my Fresco and I want them to tell me how to reprogram it. So they'll call you for free. They'll stay on with you to make sure you get what you need and get it taken care of. And you could reach out to Illuminations to do that as well, or reach out through Billows and we can make that happen. So the load controllers, we've got a power pack, again, for just about every load type you can throw at it, whether it's normal power, emergency, 0 to 10 volt, plug load, phase dimming. We've got a solution for just about any load. We also have this ARP panel. So in the past, the Acuity Brands had the LC&D system, and LC&D was a panel-based solution. All of that technology really got wrapped into nLight. So nLight really is that true platform that exists. The LMP panel connects to a Fresco, and Fresco can control or connect to nLight devices as well. But the LMP panel is going to give you Dolly. It's going to give you DMX repeaters. You can get DMX right out of the back of Fresco. It's going to give you phase dimming modules. So maybe if you're doing a restaurant or a church, the LMP panel is a great solution. And we replace old dimming panels all the time with Fresco LMP panels, and they really clean up the solution and provide great control over, again, any load type that you're going to throw at it. 2 devices at the top here.
I'm sorry, Mark, to interject a quick question that I did miss. For the battery operated dual technology occupancy sensors, Is the microphonic technology operated by listening for sound like the old clapper?
It is. However, it first needs heat, it needs motion to trip the sensor, and then sound can be used to keep it on. And why we do that, so it's any sound above a noise floor, and it learns typical sounds in the space. But what we don't want to have happen is a fire truck drive by in the middle of the night and all the lights turn off. That's not going to happen with our microphonic, right? It needs that motion first in the building, and then that sound is going to keep it on. It's a great question. Here I have some of those load controllers. So I mentioned earlier that RSBOR sensor that I showed. This is actually going to be a load controller as well. It's not just a sensor. It's actually occupancy, photocell, and it can do 800 watts at 120, 1200 at 277, and we have a 480 volt version of this that'll do about 2000 watts. It'll allow you to dim your fixture or a group of fixtures. So it's great for site lighting. Maybe you've got a pole with 4 heads. I can attach one of those sensors to a pole and control all 4 of my heads. And because it's wireless, I can have it communicate to another sensor that if any one of those sensors trips, I can actually bring the lights up to full bright. Great product that solves a lot of problems, especially when we get into exterior or harsher environments. Some other components, whether you got to interface to shades or have partitions like in a ballroom or multiple ballrooms, pillow switches, louver control for skylights. And now we even have a DMX controller. So if you're not using Fresco, but you want to have DMX control, you can add in this snapshot. Now you can get nLight communication into DMX, or you could send a DMX signal over to nLight. And where's that used for? Just about every job we're seeing these days has some form of RGBW lighting. Typically it's in the facade lighting, trying to add some color to a space, or maybe it's in a house of worship or the Kaplan Gymatorium, where you want to have some type of RGBW control, but you don't want to have to be as part of a separate system. Maybe with Fresco, but now if you've got a broader nLight system in a large commercial building, you can add in the snapshot and we can give you some color control via nLight.
Mark, a quick question about the DMX. So I'm currently working with some schools. Can scenes be programmed through the DMX for stage lighting?
Absolutely. So that's the exact, one of the exact reasons why this snapshot was made available. Is chances are you've got nLight, or you're going to have nLight throughout the rest of the facility, but you don't want to have a separate system for your theatrical or the stage lighting. The snapshot can be brought in just for that purpose. So we could do up to 16 scenes via the snapshot. Great question. Some of the backbone components, the Eclipse, again, nLight and nLight Air, the platform, they can operate as standalone systems, but the Eclipse is going to allow you to tie it together and build larger systems where I have both wired and wireless all communicating together. The Eclipse is the backbone for that. That's going to give you time clock functionality. That's going to connect into BACnet. It's going to give you some other app-based controls that I'll talk about here briefly. How you connect into broader systems or more components, you either do that through the nLight wired bridge, where I can stack bridges, one per floor or one per corner of a building. And then I have my antenna that I could also plug into my Eclipse and bring in all of my wireless devices. The DTC, as we talked about, the digital time clock, that would take the place of the Eclipse, where it just provides you basic time clock functionality, and you don't need all the other bells and whistles of a huge network. We can do that right with the DTC. And Clarity Link is also something that we can add to Eclipse that we can remotely monitor, or have a service plan where we provide connection into your system, not on your network or not on your client's network, but on our own cellular network that we can monitor, address, reprogram, and service the system from really any location. And here's just an example, again, just to kind of tie in the systems together. I can have nLight wired systems as standalone in one room or two rooms. I can have nLight Air just as one. I don't need a head end. I don't need a hub. I don't need a repeater. I don't need anything to make the system work. But if I want to add in my Eclipse, I can now bring in with a bridge multiple areas. I can connect into wireless devices, all from my Eclipse if I want to network them. I could connect to 750 devices with one Eclipse, and then I could start to daisy chain my Eclipses. Some of the software that we can provide, SensorView is standard. It's a free software. You can download it today if you wanted to. That's really how we do our programming. We can overlay a floor plan on top of that, but typically when we get into floor plans, we use what's called Envision. And Envision is a great graphical software that we could use to control lighting, give you graphics, bring in the mechanical piece so that you could see both lighting as well as HVAC, or maybe your client or end user has a mechanical component or BAS that they're already using. We could port all our BACnet points into that, and they can now get graphical control over their lighting control system. There are some edge applications that actually run on the Eclipse, nLight Spaces, nLight Explorer, and space utilization that basically give you health status of devices, that give you a 7-day running average of different spaces. So maybe conference room A, you want to see how frequently that's been populated in the last week. Might say, well, it's been occupied 7% of the time in the last 7 days. You can get all that right from the Eclipse out of the box, right? We can store that data more and more. There's a cloud service you can add on to continually run that information so you get trending over time. But there's some great software tools available with the system. So just take a quick little moment here, re-engage on a poll question here, last poll question for the presentation. But I'm just curious, when you're thinking about lighting controls, maybe not necessarily nLight, but just in general, what's driving your decision? What's the one thing that helps put you over the edge to select a control system? And give you a few seconds here to reply.
People are voting right now. We'll give it 5 more seconds, and then we'll end the poll and share the results.
Good. Got a broad cross section there. Some labor costs, material costs, energy code, capability. Capability seems to be the number one thing here. Well, that's I didn't really know what to expect, to be honest. I'm glad it's capability, because we're about to get into a capability that no one else really in the industry can touch as it relates to wireless controls, and that's ABT, or autonomous bridging technology. This is something unique to nLight Air and Acuity brands. And the challenge with wireless is there's no wires. That's also the good thing about it. But when we think about, well, what do we do if we have an issue? Or how do we know the signal is going to get to where we want the signal to get to? Those are all valid points with wireless. And Acuity, I think, has really addressed those with ABT. There's actually a white paper on ABT that you can download from Acuity that really gets into the nuts and bolts of it, but I just want to paint a couple pictures here for you. So typically with wireless systems, there's going to be things in the way. That's why you have wireless, because you want it to go through things, because you don't want to pull a wire because it's either going to add cost, it's going to be difficult, or you want to add some other functionality to it. So here's an example of a parking deck where, there's lots of steel, lots of cement. I've got some devices, and even if I'm, trying to connect to all those devices, there's a lot of obstructions, and a lot of thick obstructions that if I'm communicating from one device or a hub or some centralized antenna to get out to all those devices, my range is going to be extremely diminished, right? And that actually was the case for nLight Air for a little bit, where we actually had one device that communicated out to many, right? And we called that the group monitor. But about 1.5 years ago, Acuity actually rolled out this ABT technology, and we've had great success with it. And what it does is it actually allows one device to communicate to many, and those devices to communicate to many more. This really isn't a mesh, like a lot of people think, oh, it's like a Bluetooth mesh, or it's some type of mesh network. It's not. It's actually what we would call a distributed star technology, where I've got one device, we call it a group monitor. It's nothing special. It's a sensor, or it's a power pack. It's really nothing that you need to specify, design, select. It just happens automatically. And that group monitor is going to communicate out the commands, whether it's dimming commands or occupancy or photocell commands, out to other devices being other integrated sensors or power packs or switches. And from that point, those devices are going to say, okay, well, I'm going to communicate out to others. So this distributed star technology starts to work all its way around any obstruction you're going to throw at it. So what we typically see, in parking garages, we're getting a 600-foot diameter, 900 feet diameter in commercial office, warehouse 1,500 feet diameter, outdoor 1,000 feet plus your line of sight repeat, so like 4,000 feet. I mean, the range, the capability of nLight Air far exceeds anything else you're going to find in the market. And why I'm saying that is you're not going to need repeaters, like devices that you got to install to be a repeater. The devices that you've already installed for the lighting control act as those repeaters. So I don't need a hub. I don't need another antenna. I don't need anything else. I'm just using the devices that I already have. And this, an example here is around just an office building. Notice I don't have my Eclipse here. I just have a wall switch, and I've got embedded fixtures that have a photocell or occupancy sensor. If I want to manually override those or dim them, I could just communicate my wall switch. As long as it gets to one fixture, that's going to get to all the other fixtures because of ABT. No hub, no Eclipse, no antenna to make that happen.
Yeah, Mark, a question in the chat before you mentioned that. I think you answered the question. A signal booster is not required after a certain number of fixtures because the repeater acts as the booster, essentially.
Yeah, the device itself, the sensor itself, or the power pack itself acts as the repeater. So it's not something else you need to add. You already have it. This is a great example. This is one of the best examples I've seen. This is actually Acuity's warehouse in Conyers, Georgia. Acuity makes light fixtures. Light fixtures are metal, so there's tons of metal in here. There's lots of racks, and this is about 750 feet by 750 feet. Every gray dot you see is an integrated fixture, so it either has an nLight enabled radio in it, or it's got an nLight Air enabled sensor, and they're about 20 foot on center. So it gives you an idea of the scale. So again, these devices can all work together, right? A local group of nLight Air or nLight Wired can be 128 devices. When I want to expand the capability of the system, go up to 750 on one Eclipse, I introduce my Eclipse, and in this case, I have one antenna that's going to communicate to these devices. So what's happening? My Eclipse is actually mounted in the lower right-hand corner here. All the gray dots are receiving the first layer of information from the Eclipse. So maybe it's sending out a time clock command. Turn the lights on. Where you see those gray dots surrounded by the black square, those devices are automatically standing up saying, hey, we're on the periphery of this first layer. We still have a really strong signal strength. We're going to repeat this out to the next layer. All the red dots that you see are receiving that second layer of information. If you notice, just 2 or 3 dots over where the Eclipse is, there's a red square. And you're thinking, well, that's pretty close to the antenna. Why don't you have connection there? This is I think some of the reluctance behind wireless. We don't know. RF shadows could be created by something there. Maybe there's a pole, or maybe there's a lot of metal, or maybe there's something. But it's close, and you'd think it would connect, but it doesn't. But this is what ABT provides, is that connection to everything. So I go to my red squares, and then I go all the way up to the upper right-hand corner. There's one red square surrounded by a black square, again saying, I'm on the periphery, I have a strong signal, I'm going to repeat out to the next wave. We just have a handful of purple squares. We can do this a couple more times. So the reality of nLight Air is that you're going to run out of devices for your Eclipse before you run out of range of the wireless network. So ABT really provides some killer range, some robust reliability, repeatability from a wireless system that you're not going to get from anywhere else. The last thing here, before we wrap up, certainly happy to hang on as long as we need for questions. But Atrius, this really is what's next. Atrius takes advantage of the nLight Air technology in that, as I said, every nLight Air device has a Bluetooth radio in it. The Bluetooth is used initially for programming, then we go down to 900 megahertz. That Bluetooth radio can double as a Bluetooth beacon, and this is what Atrius is. So now, just like you've got your smartphone, right? You got your lighting control system, but you want to add GPS, so I'm going to download Google Maps. With your lighting control system, you've got an energy efficient, code compliant lighting control system that's easy to install with nLight or nLight Air. Now I can take advantage of my Bluetooth beacons and add in software, and that software is called Atrius, and it can serve a number of purposes. But you've got the hardware already in place. There's one other, or there's a device called an edge gateway. And that's a device that's going to aggregate all of your Bluetooth information because, again, Bluetooth doesn't go very far. So we have these edge gateways to gather the Bluetooth information and wrap it up into however we want to display that. So we can provide connection or applications for just about any application where you can take advantage of Bluetooth, whether it's asset tracking, a Bluetooth tag on a device, whether it's expensive equipment, or even on someone's badge, right? If you're interested, right? With Corona, we talked a lot about contract tracing, but you can utilize Bluetooth tags on devices to now communicate position to the fixtures, right? Anywhere you've got a built environment, you need light. Anywhere you've got light, you're going to have power. So why not take advantage of that power source, those Bluetooth beacons that are already in your nLight Air system, to deploy an intelligent system throughout your space? And that's what Atrius provides us. Here's kind of a real world or a real life cycle of that information, how it transmits. What we're doing as Acuity Brands and Illuminations is providing the data, right? And then on the front end or the user interface, they can create an app. They can take that data and what we call an API, where we basically provide you any data, we provide you an API, and then you do with it whatever you want. We say we're hands off. So it's not like Acuity or Illuminations, has that data or is looking at it. It's yours. You do with it what you want. We can run a cloud service. We could run an app or build an app, but typically there's a lot of other people engaged in that process, and we'll hand you the information to make that happen. Sometimes with asset tracking or even indoor positioning, we've seen sometimes whether it's tracking of forklifts in a warehouse, trying to figure out the best direction for which they'll go, or attaching a Bluetooth tag to a piece of material that's going to go through a warehouse to understand that process, how long it sits in one location, and what's the best way to navigate it through. Maybe, in the instance of Target, who I cited earlier, they've rolled out Acuity and this technology in all their stores that when you open a Cartwheel app, it actually communicates to the app, to your phone, through a number of different means. It can do it via Bluetooth, or what happens is Bluetooth gets you to open your app, and now the lights themselves can actually pulse a frequency. It's called visible light communication. And then the forward-facing camera on your smartphone actually decodes that information as a location. So not only is it taking you to the toothpaste aisle, the Crest toothpaste, but also to the Crest toothpaste with the sparkles in it. So it can get you exactly where you need to be on X, Y, and Z axis. So we don't really care what you do with that data, but Target does, right? Target wants to help their consumers. Target also wants to know, where do people spend their time, or what do they look at? Are they looking at this end cap versus that end cap? And they can take and turn that around and monetize that. Or in the case of an airport, guiding people through an airport. If you've ever been through Hartsfield-Jackson, look up at the fixtures. It's the largest airport in the world by volume. But there's a little Bluetooth beacon in every single one of those fixtures, from the terminal or the luggage terminal all the way through your gates, right? And they can guide you to where you need to be. So the indoor positioning is a huge deal, even in big healthcare systems where you want to guide someone who may be distressed from the parking lot to where their loved one may be, right? This solution can provide that for you. And then lastly, space utilization, just understanding how your building operates. Where do people spend their time? Do you not even use that conference room? Should we convert that into private offices, or just open it up to more of a cubicles, right? Give you insights into what's actually happening within your building. And then the next level on this, I mentioned earlier, Distech. We don't represent Distech, however, we work hand in hand with them. But Distech is going to bring in the mechanical portion of the facility and controls, so that really you can have a complete system that maybe you've got a touch screen on the wall in the Unitouch that's going to control your temperature, your lighting, your shades, the color temperature of your lighting, and then give you an app that someone in a private office can do all that. So really taking these steps, these software steps, bringing in some other hardware, we can really do some amazing things with the nLight platform. And with that, I'll just recap. Again, happy to address any questions, but the idea, smart, simple, scalable, start with one little room, go to a floor, go to a building, go to a campus, go to multiple campuses with the nLight platform. You can do it, whether wired, wireless, indoor, outdoor. We've got one solution, one platform for everything. No interfaces, no repeaters, none of that. It just happens on one system. One manufacturer, one person can come back to say, how is this thing going to work? Why doesn't it work? Or, great, I'm so glad this is so easy. If you need support on drawings, I mentioned earlier, Illuminations has 18 people on their controls team. We can help with layouts, drawings, designs, field service, troubleshooting, you name it, we're here to support. So with that, I thank you for your time. I want to honor your time at 12:45 here. I do appreciate everybody tuning in. Happy to hang on.
No, absolutely. Go ahead, Matt. We've got some questions.
Yeah, some questions in the chat. So if a repeater fixture goes bad in a daisy chain setup, do the rest of the series become disabled? I guess kind of like one light goes out, they all go out.
So it sounds like maybe there's two questions in that. So the repeater in wireless, if that goes out, another device is just going to stand up and say, hey, everybody now listen to me, right? I'm no longer getting communication from that one. Everybody, route through me. In terms of the daisy chain for nLight wired, no, if a device fails in a daisy chain via nLight wired, the internal wiring is still connected together, that it actually is still going to communicate the signal. Where that one device, whether it's a switch or a power pack or a sensor, may have indeed failed, the communication still occurs. If something were to happen to the cable or the termination, or if it were to pull out, then yes, everything downstream would no longer communicate. But that's a pretty easy thing to troubleshoot because everything stops communicating in one section. And you typically can go back and look to see where that was connected.
Thanks. A question. I'm seeing reluctance to transition to wireless lighting in certain school districts because they are not confident in their staff's reliability from IT or maintenance workers. What is your take on this reluctance and how can we overcome this challenge?
Yeah, I think I've heard that, I've seen that, I've felt that, I think from a lot of school districts. And I think the perception to them is the reality, right? They may think that their staff or the people that they have, aren't as sophisticated to handle something like this. But really, the reality is we give you all the tools. We give them all the tools. We have the people in place. We have the right partners to make sure that it's really not an issue because they're doing sophisticated things already with their smart boards and with their computers and with other building systems. The lighting is no different. Within the tools, within Clarity, which is the app that we use to program nLight Air, there's troubleshooting tools that you can go in and just go into the troubleshooting menu, and then it'll output a report. Because you've got a smartphone, you could send that right to Acuity. You could be on the phone with them, and they'll say, "Thank you for that report. I can see what's happening." So it's really not putting the onus on the school. It's putting the onus on the manufacturer, making it simple enough for them to be able to use it.
Any more questions in the chat? I do see a lot of thank yous. That was very informative, great presentation. So Mark, I think mission accomplished here today. Thank you so much for your time. Everyone, I'd like to thank you so much for your time, your attention. We'll be sure to get the recording out of this session in the next week or so. And with that, everyone, have a great day. It's beautiful out there. Enjoy.